Right now, the public narrative blames inflation on the Middle East. It's an easy sequence to follow. Geopolitical conflict leads to supply chain friction, which causes prices to spike at the pump and the grocery store. But the Federal Reserve ignores the headline numbers that dominate the news. They use a different scoreboard entirely, targeting a 2% inflation rate measured by personal consumption expenditures, or the PCE. This chart tracks the Fed's preferred measure. The PCE has missed its 2% target for 63 months in a row, over 5 years of failure. It currently sits at 4%, double the target. We're using a 5-month-old story to explain a 5-year-old crisis. Misjudging the timeline is dangerous. It leads us to attack a short-term symptom while missing the nature of the actual disease we are trying to cure. For decades, inflation in this country behaved like a pendulum. From 1985 to 2007, a period known as the Great Moderation, prices would swing up, swing back down, and reliably come to rest around that 2% center. The economy didn't regulate itself through an invisible hand. The Federal Reserve operated the mechanism manually, stepping in to push the pendulum back toward the center every single time it swung too far. Over the last 5 years, that mechanism ran into trouble. The tool the Fed uses to push the economy toward stability has completely seized up. Because every mortgage, every car loan, and savings account is priced off a stable 2% anchor, a broken mechanism threatens the entire financial system. To see what changed, we have to look at the last time the Fed faced a crisis this large. In the late 1970s, inflation was sprinting into double-digit territory, peaking at 13.5%. The dollar was losing its value in real time. In 1979, Fed Chair Paul Volcker took over and jacked interest rates up to 20%. He deliberately triggered 2 back-to-back recessions to strangle the money supply until inflation had nothing left to feed on. Volcker had a mathematical advantage that is rarely discussed today. When he began tightening policy, the national debt was only a quarter the size of the total economy. The nation's debt profile was small enough to absorb the shock of high rates. Volcker could slam the brakes on the economy without government interest payments breaking the budget. Today, the national debt matches 100% of the entire economy. This shift rewrites the mathematical rules that governed the Volcker era. When the Fed raises rates today, we see the expected reaction. Loans become expensive, borrowing drops, and consumer spending slows down. This is the brake pedal in action. However, a secondary reaction quietly emerges underneath the surface. Higher rates immediately force the U.S. government to pay massive interest on its existing debt. Net interest is now running around $1 trillion a year. That bill currently consumes 19 cents of every dollar the federal government collects in taxes. That $1 trillion doesn't vanish from the economy. It lands directly in the pockets of the pension funds, banks, and foreign governments that lent the U.S. government money in the first place. Those entities then spend that cash or roll it into new bonds at the current higher rates. This means the same move intended to pull money out of the economy is quietly pumping fresh dollars right back in. At 100% debt to GDP, the Fed's primary weapon has short-circuited. They are pressing the brake and the accelerator at the exact same time. There is a public illusion right now that inflation is cooling off, but consumer prices are lagging indicators. They are the last things to move. Housing costs, which make up 35% of the headline number, take months or years to reflect current economic pressure. The money supply moves first. In 1981, economists Thomas Sargent and Neil Wallace predicted this exact trap, warning that the central bank cannot shrink a debt that the government refuses to stop growing. Their thesis was simple. If the government never runs a surplus, the central bank only gets to decide what form the debt takes. They can choose to issue cash or issue bonds. Choosing bonds to fight inflation today guarantees a massive wave of interest payments tomorrow. Eventually, those payments become so large that the government is forced to print more cash just to cover them. The Federal Reserve has stopped fighting inflation in any real capacity. They are simply postponing it while the underlying structural rot compounds. This structural crisis was built over 25 years of persistent spending in Washington. The government's fiscal choices have created an underlying pressure that central bank policy cannot fix on its own. Warren Buffett once proposed a simple solution: pass a law that bans any sitting member of Congress from re-election any time the national deficit exceeds 3% of GDP. His joke highlights the core problem. Politicians have a structural incentive to spend money to win elections. No one builds a career in Washington by promising voters less, which keeps the debt snowball rolling. Until the government's deficit spending is dismantled, the math will continue to move against us. Any perceived victory over inflation today is merely an illusion waiting to shatter.